Hello, everyone. My name is Pian Pian. I'm the founder and CEO of Amotions. Amotions is a platform to help you increase success and happiness by developing soft skills such as emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, and leadership skills via community, content, AI insights, and skills assessments by experts. Today, we are very happy to have Dr. David Caruso. David Caruso has earned his PhD in psychology, and he has co-authored multiple books and tests, including the MSCI Emotional Intelligence Test with John Mayer and current Yale President Peter Salovey. And he has coached and trained executives around the world on emotional intelligence. And David has kindly offered to do an intro session on emotional intelligence with us, and we plan to have more upcoming workshops in the area of emotional intelligence. And he has also offered to do emotional intelligence feedback sessions after any emotional intelligence test as well, and by himself, all his colleagues. So thank you so much for joining, David. We're really excited and look forward to hearing what you can share with us today.
Thanks for having me, Pian Pian. Thanks for joining. Great. Well, like with every such thing, I'm going to share my screen and we'll show some slides. It's interesting because, we're talking about emotions, and emotions are they're interpersonal. And so seeing people is really helpful. But at the same time, I like the structure of slides. And for me, it is an emotion management technique. It allows me to stay focused. So there's lots of reasons to do these things. All right. Great. The very last slide, I believe, has my email address. So for questions, comments, feedback, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. First, really quickly, if there's any personal information that we don't share that, but we do share and apply the content. That's really, really key. I think knowledge is of interest in and of itself, but we're really focused on behavior change. Like, what are we going to do differently? And I think that's absolutely critical when you engage in this kind of work. What is emotional intelligence? It's a term that's been around for a little more now than 30 years, in the popular press for a little over 25 years. But we have a really specific way of looking at it. And in our view, my colleagues' view and myself, we see emotional intelligence as consisting of these 4 related skills. And we call them hard skills. It's not soft skills. And we'll go over the model a couple times, give you some background, but we'll spend most of our time on how to apply these skills, because that's the key. So first of all, what's the basis for it? Where does this stuff come from? And there's a lot of different strands of work, so in the next 3 or so minutes, I just want to give you a real grounding for why are we here? Where's this stuff come from? So the first basis for emotional intelligence as a hard skill is that emotions are data. I love saying that. I want to say it again. I like it so much. Emotions are data. It's a form of information. They send signals. So here's a pretty basic example. If you're out in the street later today, it's getting dark, and you come across the animal in the top middle with the outlined in red, that's a signal, right? That animal is signaling something to you. And your failure to read that emotion and read that signal could cause you some difficulties. Now, compare that. You then turn the corner, you come across the dog in the lower right, outlined in green. That's a different kind of signal. This dog is signaling something really different. And if you're a dog person, you may call this either submission, or a real dog person would call it a play bow. It's like, hey, scratch my belly and throw the ball for me. Let's have fun. Not a threat. I sometimes wonder when I'm really tired or groggy or wake up in the middle of the night and remember a dream. I sometimes wish that our human world were more like this. Like imagine you're in a meeting, and it's a contentious meeting, and someone just growls at you and bares their teeth. Isn't that better than kind of just these snarky comments that sometimes you get? Or somebody else, you're in a meeting with a colleague and you're not sure if that was a joke, but you are because he's just engaged in a play bow. So maybe in a future world, we could be more dog-like and be a little more direct in sending these signals. So here's something else. This is the work of Antonio Damasio. A lot of what we do tends to be counterintuitive. It's like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Like, where does that come from? And I think this is one of those statements. A lot of us are taught that emotions just get in your way. They really mess you up. And we have a different view that emotions can help you think. So Damasio wrote, this is some years ago, that far from interfering with rationality, the absence of emotion and feeling can break down rationality, make wise decision making almost impossible. So if you really think about that for a moment, he says, emotions help you make good decisions. But that's like not anything we're taught. We're taught the opposite. So where is that coming from? And I hope that you'll see this in a minute, like where that does come from. So all these strands of research came together. Two psychologists met in the 1980s and went to a conference. They wrote a little article that nobody read. They came up with the theory of emotional intelligence. And as Pian mentioned at the beginning, those people are Peter Salovey and John D. or Jack Mayer. They wrote this article, many, many years ago. Didn't get any attention until years later when someone wrote a popular book and brought it to our attention. It happens that the three of us have been working together for quite a while as well. And we have a way of measuring emotional intelligence. It's an objectively scored, skill-based assessment. It's challenging to take. It's challenging to hear the results as well. And that's because most of us overestimate our emotional intelligence. And something to think about is, so what's the problem if you're overestimating your skills in this area? And you can think of a few issues, right? One is, I think I have a good read on people, but maybe I misread that individual. Or I don't manage my emotions well. Or I'm not matching my emotions with others. I don't make those connections. I wonder why that is. So there's some challenges with that overestimation. Now, a reason I show you this is not just to plant that idea, but to show you that in 30 years, we've got a pretty good basis for what we're talking about today. 30 years of research. Most of these are peer-reviewed journals. I'm trained as a researcher, but my role is as a practitioner. As Pian mentioned, Jack is a professor at University of New Hampshire in the psych department, and Peter is a psychologist as well. He's now president of Yale. So these are some of our publications. I've known them for years, for more than 30 years. We've been colleagues and friends, and that's how I got involved. So with that as a background, so one other thing before we move into some real practical things. A lot of you come to this thinking, oh, it's the most important thing in the world. It's like super, more important than anything. It's a superpower. Again, I'm trained as a researcher, and it's really hard for me to make claims that have no basis in reality. So I do need to be pretty blunt about this, which is emotional intelligence is an important skill. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it's really helpful. And we know that people who take Mesquite, they score higher in that. Here are the outcomes. They engage in more pro-social helping behavior. They can handle stress better. They're more empathetic. They're better at handling conflict. I love the last one in the work environment. It's they're, as managers, they're able to help their teams accomplish things a little bit better, but it's how they do that. An inelegant way of saying it is they're just not jerks about getting things done, right? You can be a decent human being and still be a productive person and get people on the same path. So again, a real brief overview of where this stuff comes from, what the model is, how we measure it, and why it's important. So With that, think about this. How many times a day does someone say, hey, how you doing? How are you? And I'd say probably, for me, a couple of dozen times. But that how are you question is usually not a question. So what do you usually say? Hey, how you doing? For those of you who are parents of school-age children, how was school today? What's an answer that you typically get? I think these are fairly common. Oh, it was fine. How you doing? Oh, I'm okay. What does that mean? What data have you shared? And we'd say the answer is, you tell me. Do you know anything about that person? And I would say no. Now, there are some cultural differences. So, in the United States, you get a lot of awesomes. But even when someone says they're awesome, it's kind of meaningless. And if you think about this, for many years, I'd ask people about a typical day. The last 3 or 4 years, when I've asked about a typical day, people can't answer because it's like, well, I don't have one. So if you think about a week or a month or a year in your lives are filled with emotions. And that means every single person you meet in the workplace, every leader, every employee, every customer, if you're a parent, every child, if you're a child, every parent, if you're a human being, every friend, every person you meet has a rich, inner, complex emotional life. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, your lives are filled with emotions. From like the little general hassles of daily life, like, I didn't get a great sleep last night, or it was cold today, to the huge systemic issues facing our world. So when you say, in answer to the, hey, how you doing question, if you say fine, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. We are emotional beings, for better, not for worse, for better. So we have emotions, but why they get in our way at the same time? Why do we have anger? Why do we have anxiety? Why do we have hatred? Why do we have disgust? Why do we have envy? It messes up our lives. But why do we have compassion and gratitude and appreciation and love? And because it makes us who we are. And you can't trade one for the other. We are living rich, emotional lives. So one of the takeaways from today should be, well, try this one. Maybe surprise someone when they say, how you doing? Don't say fine. Maybe consider giving them a real answer, whatever that might be. You may be pleasantly surprised at how an honest dialogue like that can really enhance your relationships, as long as it's developmentally appropriate. And we'll get to that in a moment. So here's the how are you question. The other reason I think a lot of us don't answer that how are you question with any degree of specificity is because we lack the language, right? Like, I'm feeling kind of, oh, yeah, I kind of know. So again, for years, starting about 25 years ago, actually, I put this up. I used to call it a mood meter and just say, indicate how much energy you have, 0 to 10, and how pleasant you're feeling, 0 to 10. Give me those numbers. It doesn't work very well anymore because we're so complicated. And that I just ask, which of these words or other words describe how you're feeling? I'll give you an example. For me, I'm interested to see how this goes. I'm pretty thoughtful. I'm hopeful that this goes well, but I am definitely worried, tense, and anxious because I so desperately want this to go well. So I have that little bit of anxiety. So do consider this without overwhelming that other person. Just ask in a way, how are you really? This is skill number one. Now, why does it matter? Here's something else that's counterintuitive. So skill 1 of 4. Now that you know how you are and how that other person is, let's say there's just 2 of you, do your current feelings help you? Do they match the task? Do they match the other person? Will you emotionally connect with people? So in this model, this is really simple. So we miss some complexities here, but it's hard to do this in real time. So here's a quick example. We know that people who are sad, not depressed, are a little bit better at finding details or focusing on details or finding errors in a document. I mean, think about it for yourself. You know, this happens to me where I'm thinking, oh, I've got a presentation tomorrow and I have a great idea, this brainstorm. I'm super energized, feeling really great. I'm in that joyous, creative mode. And I put in a new slide and it's great. And then it's 7:30 in the morning. I have the presentation and I show the slide. It's like, uh-oh, that doesn't belong there, or there's typos there. So the matching idea is, now that you know how you're feeling, that other person's how they're doing, do these emotions help? Do they facilitate your thinking? And the other piece is, let's say you do have a friend who, this has probably happened to you. You're really dying to talk to this person about what's going on. You're having some difficulties in your life. And they say, hey, how you doing? Everything good? It's kind of hard to then say, well, not really. You know, so you want to pick up on those signals and then match that initial feeling. That's a real connection. That's the essence of our humanity. It also means it's kind of hard to do. Skill number 3. Okay, now that you've figured this out, all right, you know, I'm saying I'm kind of, you know, a little anxious, but also kind of curious, and I'm matching that other person. Tell me what's going on. Like, where is this coming from? How might your feelings change? Psychologists call it affective forecasting. I call it an emotional what-if analysis. In the workplace, pretty straightforward. You know, have you ever heard someone say, "Hey, what's on tap for this afternoon?" Oh, end of the year performance review with so and so. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, good luck with that. You know, and the other person says, "Well, no, he won't be surprised at this negative feedback." You know, anytime I hear that phrase, that person should not be surprised, it usually means it's going to be a big surprise. So how about a little forecasting about how that's going to go and a little preparation? It doesn't take a lot, but it's enormously helpful. So the fourth skill is really key. It's moving emotions. Emotions are always in motion. And so you're moving these things in real time. Stuff is changing. So I always want to be thinking about, how do you manage those feelings to maximize, in this case, engagement today in our time together? Like, what are you going to do? And for our time together, I think it's most helpful to be in this little lower energy is fine, but pleasant, thoughtful, considering things. So how do you get there if you're not? How do you stay there if you are? That's an interesting question. So I'm going to work at this, right? I'm going to try to keep you engaged and keep you focused. But like any interaction, it takes more than one person. So for me, I've turned my email off. I've put my phone someplace, can't see it. And I also feel, you know, I definitely have a sense of obligation that I feel, that I'm trying to remind myself. I've done this before, but this is new to you. And so I have this obligation to you to not just mail it in, but to be really present and focused on making sure that I can do the best job possible. So with that, that's what we mean by emotional intelligence. I sometimes call it the ability model of emotional intelligence, or emotional intelligence. So let's talk about now the practical ways of building these 4 hard skills. Mapping your feelings and those of others, matching those feelings, understanding the meaning of them, and moving them in real time to achieve outcomes. If this sounds pretty simple or simplistic, I absolutely agree. This is like really simple. But the challenge is, I'll repeat this at the end, but the challenge is doing this at a really high level of skill in real time, on a consistent basis and under stressful conditions. So I have yet to meet someone who meets all those criteria. I am definitely not one of those people. Doing this work, you should find incredibly humbling, because it's really hard to pull that off under stress consistently at home. It's very hard to do all those things, but we try, right? We try to be a little bit better. So here's the first thing to think about. I mentioned this before. How can you ask, how are you, to promote those connections, to inspire dialogue? At work, for me, when a colleague says, how you doing? If it's not an appropriate time to actually have this conversation, I don't want to, I call it lying, right? To say, oh, I'm great, if it's not the case. But something I sometimes say is like, well, lots is going on, but I'm really pleased to be speaking with you, if that's the case. So think about the tone in which you ask this question. Think about how you can ask the question so you get an honest answer. The classically bad question, if you're a parent of a school-age child, for instance, is, how was school today? It's probably, depending on the age, a monosyllabic response, which is, oh, fine. Or if a teenager is like, ask more specific questions. Did you have music class today? Did you enjoy it? Why was that? You can think of questions like that as a parent or as a teacher. In the workplace, you might want to say, how did the meeting go? How are you feeling about our progress on this project? And without putting your thumb too heavily on the scale, you might want to say, I think some of us are a little frustrated with the pace of change. You allow people to have those opinions. I think some of us don't ask because we're worried about the answer. Like, what if someone tells us how they're really feeling? My God, what do I do then? You'll see in a bit, I think I have some good answers to those questions. So think about this. In your next conversation with someone, surprise them and surprise yourself, and try to actually ask the question, how are you? Tone matters. I will give you an example, a non-work example. I remember when my youngest child, I think he was 8 or 9, a pretty tough time in my life. And I was home that day. He comes off the bus and says, Daddy, how you doing? I said, well, I had a really hard day. So I'm kind of tired and a little sad, but I'm so happy to see you. And I didn't have to tell him why I felt that way, right? That's the developmentally appropriate response that you want to think about. Now, later when he was older, when he was in, I think he had just graduated college, it was, hey, Dad, what's going on? And I said, well, lots is going on, let me tell you. And he paused and he said, wow, that's pretty heavy. But it allowed that open dialogue. And we still have that open dialogue and relationship today. So developmentally appropriate in the workplace, you want to be careful of power dynamics. If you're the boss and you ask your team how they're feeling, they own the right not to answer you honestly, because you are their boss. That power dynamic, don't mess with that and be really careful. Well, now you've asked and you kind of got the good lay of the land. What do? Well, we would say match task to the emotion. And again, you might find this somewhat counterintuitive, but if you kind of reflect a little bit on your life, hopefully this makes more sense. So I mentioned about giving feedback. What about receiving feedback? What's the ideal quadrant in our mood map to help you really process that, to really just do, I'm gonna think about that. Pleasant emotions, feelings, but lower energy. If you're like too energized, it's like, okay, we're going to do this, like you're racing ahead, right? You want to be that more receptive frame of mind. Someone's experienced a loss in their life, whatever that might be. Providing comfort to others requires that lower energy, low pleasantness feeling. It's not whether you agree with that person or not. This is not saying, you shouldn't feel that way. This is how they feel. You owe it to them to kind of match that. And then think about you and your own life and your own space that you inhabit. What task would be best facilitated by a real high energy, high pleasant emotion, feelings? You want to inspire people, no matter what's going on. At the end of this, I want you to actually leave this session. If your energy is lower, that's fine. If you're inspired, cool. How great is that? And how do you do that? And finally, I understand that anger can be enormously destructive to people, to societies, to relationships. But anger does have a healthy component to it. Anger rises from a sense of injustice. Now, if you believe we live in a very just society, then maybe there's no cause for anger. I happen to think that's not the world that I live in. And there are times where anger is very justifiable. It gives you the energy to make this a better place. If you handle it well. If you don't, it just blows up in your face. It's really destructive. I'm also a huge fan of anxiety. Anxiety and I have a long relationship. And sometimes it means I can't go to sleep easily at night. But anxiety, without anxiety, none of us would be here today. Anxiety means we look both ways when we cross the street. Anxiety means if you went to school and graduated, you studied for the exam. Anxiety really helps if it's a healthy form of anxiety. So to think about this, whether it's any kind of conversation or meeting at work, try to create that ideal emotional environment. Otherwise, you're kind of just like mailing it in. It's not that hard to do. So, speaking of these statements about, you're worried about that, or you shouldn't feel that way. You ask someone how they feel. How many times have someone just kind of dismissed how you felt and you realize you just don't get it? So again, this is more from parenting. Child asks, well, why can't I stay up late tonight? Typical answer is because. Kind of not helpful. Or a worry. A very competent student says, I don't think I'm going to get into good colleges, and I'm really worried. Oh, my friends are talking about it. We oftentimes dismiss that. Oh, don't worry about it. You're doing really well. And it's this kind of hand waving, that dismissive thing. It's so invalidating. It's really frustrating. This is such an important strategy. I'm going to come back to it in a little bit. But no matter what your question is, to explore the inner emotional life of friends, family, and others, no matter what they come back with, a wonderful validating strategy is, I can see how you might feel that way. Or I can see how someone might feel that way. Man, if you want to build a relationship, I would try this. You're asking how you're doing, why? And rather than just dismissing it, oh, that's silly, that's ridiculous. Try this. All right, I can see how someone might feel that way. It's a validation strategy. It works because they do feel that way. You can't argue. Well, I guess you could try to argue that away, but that's a losing argument. And you should lose that argument. You should definitely lose that argument. Here's another slightly counterintuitive thing for you to think about. I hope with all these things that you'll actually be able to leave with one or two behaviors that you'll try. Here's a great one. I like this one. So I talked about validating, right? So we would say validate, but then investigate. So some of you will come to this thinking, oh, it's about trusting your gut. I would say that that's a bad idea. Trust your analyzed gut. And here's why. So bear with me on this. We have feelings. Feelings are physical sensations. We feel a certain way. I've got that, knot in my stomach. This doesn't feel right. Something's going on here. Well, before you act on that feeling, investigate it. Because feelings come from two general sources. Background moods, have you ever been in a quote unquote bad mood? Well, that is not something to act on. That's something to manage away. They're messy. It'll mess you up as well. But the feeling, the physical feelings can also come from an emotion, an event. Remember, emotions are data. Something happened. I think about, projects, project meetings, hiring in the workplace. I don't have a good feeling about this candidate. Well, before you act on that feeling, analyze it. Where did it come from? What percentage of that quote unquote bad feeling is due to the fact that you were in a crummy mood? You just didn't sleep well last night. What percent of that feeling is due to the fact of what this individual said? Let's look at my notes. And where does that come from? And how do you do this? Just ask yourself, how would somebody else have reacted? Am I reasonable? Am I accurate? Have I made the correct assumptions? Do I know the other person's intent, or am I just in a bad mood today? I gave this example before, but it was so powerful for me. I think about 2 weeks ago, I was in a really, we'll say, a bad mood. Let's use that very generic term. I was a little snippy with people. I was like, oh, come on, guys, just my emails weren't as emotionally intelligent as they should be. This happened for a couple of days. Wasn't sleeping well. So day 3, I'm making my morning coffee, and I just pause for a moment. And I look at the coffee, because for me, I have like a half a scoop of caffeinated and 2.5 of decaf, and I have a mug of coffee. So there's a little caffeine in there. For the last 2.5 days or 2 or 3 days, what I had done is not looked at the bags of coffee. I was having fully caffeinated mug of coffee, and I'm not used to that. I was wired. I mean, I was like highly caffeinated, and I don't do caffeine very well. And I just realized, oh my God, so it was not an emotion, it was a mood. And I felt like I needed to recall 2.5 days of emails and conversations and apologize to people. But on the other hand, I was really relieved and realized it wasn't me. I mean, it was me, but it was caffeine is a powerful stimulant, but not really a great one. So yeah. Anyway, I tell you this because this happens to all of us, but it was such a clear and concrete example. I will tell this for the rest of my life. I think it really illustrates this point. Good. Envy, another thing to really think about. I did a talk for youth ministers a couple of months ago, and I decided to keep the quote, and I forgot where it comes from, honestly. And we were talking about envy, and especially around social media. And initially it was going to be on teens and preteens, but as it turns out, youth ministers also would experience envy. No, your congregation, remodeled your home, or you have your sermons are well attended or retweeted. Envy is really corrosive. I experienced this a lot. And this is a strategy that is enormously effective. Not if, but when you're experiencing envy. Oh man, I wish, I had their life. They're just like so perfect. Like, look at all the stuff that's going on. Think about this. You can't pick and choose aspects of that other person's life. If you truly envy that person's life, and you would have to trade your entire existence for that of that other individual. So if you could enter a body swapping machine, if you remember the movie Freaky Friday, all right, that's what you'd have to do. You would have to become that person. Would you do it? If you would, please message me later, because I asked this question. I've yet to meet someone who says they would. They'd say, well, I'd love to have some aspect of that person's life, but no way. There's no way I would do that. And I will tell you, anytime I experience envy, it takes me a couple of seconds to think about that and realize there is no way I would do that. My life is far from perfect, but I'm not going to give up my relationships and my children and grandchildren. I'm not going to do that. Think about that. It really helps. We talk about checking your emotions at the door. We talk about not being emotional. Emotions are wonderful. Emotions can mess us up, but they also give us meaning, and emotions are data, and emotions can facilitate thinking. The problem is in what we do with those emotions. And a lot of us talk about controlling our emotions and how important it is. We're going to do a little demonstration. Probably like one or two of you to keep your camera on, and the others will turn their cameras off. Let me show you what we're going to do. For those of you who keep the camera on, you will be our volunteer leader if you want to apply this to the workplace, parent if you want to do parent to child, or teacher to student. I'm going to turn my camera off in a moment. In fact, I'll do it now. I will be the staff member, child, or student. And here's what we're going to do. If your camera is on, I'd like you to be that leader or teacher. I'd like you to position your Zoom window so that you can see these slides, and minimize your window so you're not looking at those of us on camera. The rest of us will be the staff member or a child or a student. And we're configuring our windows and maximizing them so that we can see those who are on camera. And again, if you're on camera, just make sure you can see the top and the bottom of the screen. What are we going to do? Well, the leaders are going to watch the slides and show no emotion. The rest of us are simply going to make mental notes and observe these volunteer leaders or parents or teachers. I am also going to mute myself so you don't hear anything in the background. So with that, let's begin in a moment, and there should be no comments. We'll do a debrief at the end. Thank you. Okay. So here's a question. How many jokes, slides, cartoons were there? You can either say it or enter it in chat. How many jokes, cartoons were there? Yeah, for those who were on camera. Please.
5.
Okay. Pian, how many were there?
6.
Okay. So there were 7. There were 7. That's interesting. Now, the two of you, I thought, did a pretty good job. You know, those who have a poor poker face, which I don't think you did. You know, sometimes you see like these, like, you know, a little bit of uncomfortable things or a bit of a smile appears. Didn't really see that. But I turn my video off, even though I've seen these hundreds of times, because I have a terrible poker face. And my wife always says, "You're a bad liar." So, and I am a bad liar. But the problem with a poor poker face is emotions leak, right? So we show our lack of comfort. And it really harms our relationships, right? Because it might be, hey, boss, I hear we're going to do a reorg. Is that true? It is true, but it's confidential. I can't tell you. So if my emotions leak, it's like, well, you know, this organization, we're sort of, come on, really? You don't trust me to tell me? And at home, as parents or as teachers, it's the same thing, which is mom, dad, teacher, everything okay? Oh yeah, everything's great, great. You know, everything's terrific. No, it's not. And so what you're saying, you're sending the message that we actually don't talk about how we feel here. We suppress those emotions, but it's clear something's going on. It's really clear. Now, in this case, you had a really good poker face. So 5 or 6 slides, there were 7. Let me ask you, what did you do to stay neutral? Are you aware of the strategies you use to like not?
I didn't think I was neutral because I was laughing my head off inside me.
I didn't see it. I mean, I tried to, I didn't see it. So, so I'm glad to hear you found them funny, because some people say, oh, what did you do then not to smile? Though? I'm curious.
Yes, it says I really don't. I think I just kept. I was just really very conscious of me laughing inside, and I didn't want it to bubble over. So I think I was making so much effort not to.
Well, it worked. But the problem is you didn't realize there were 7. Could you actually tell me what the slides were in order, what the jokes were in order?
I know. Now I could tell you what some of them were, but not the specific order.
Okay.
I think icebreaker one was the first one, and Armageddon was maybe the third one. No, I don't.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, because this illustrates this point, which is, this comes from the work of James Gross, a psychologist at Stanford, who PNPN has interviewed. Brilliant researcher, excellent presenter, very nice person. What he says is, you know, suppressing that smile, those emotions, costs us. Right? There's a cost. If we're suppressing, we're not paying attention to what's going on. And so we say there was 5 slides. No, there were 7. What was the order? Well, there was like icebreaker, but this happens in meetings to me sometimes. It's what we call it, like spacing out sometimes, or at home, you're trying not to react. And it's like, well, what did you just say? And so, look, there are times to suppress. Absolutely. Because maybe if you didn't suppress, you would say something you would regret later. So please, you know, suppression is important, and we can do it. We all do it, and that's fine. But we shouldn't use it as our go-to or main strategy. Because of this issue here, we're not present. And also because it doesn't work for some of us. You know, we emotions are leaking, and our students, our children, our employees are realizing that you're not being honest with me. And that is corrosive to a relationship. Other stuff doesn't work. Oh, and I know everyone knows this, but it's important just to say, in addition to suppression, just like blaming yourself, like, oh, I'm such a terrible, that's not helpful. Or blaming others, you know, avoidance, denial, wishful thinking, oh, it'll be better tomorrow. The sun will come out tomorrow. We all do this. I do a lot of these things, but they're not helpful. So what is? If suppression doesn't work, these things don't work. These are common things we engage in. You want to reduce these and increase these other strategies. The first ones are things you all know. Again, none of this should be news. The question is, how do you actually do these things? So this is a list of some of the longer term strategies. And what the diagram is supposed to show is the following, which is the more you do these things, the more likely you are to reduce your set point, which means the more hassles it takes to set you off. So if you've ever yelled at someone, well, I was loss of sleep, I haven't been exercising, I haven't been engaged in my prayer, mindfulness, I'm not doing these things, so I'm more easily set off. Okay. The more you do these things, the more patience you have is one way to look at it. So how do you create routines that allow you to do these things? The answers can be really hard. I've done a lot of work in healthcare, and I always tell people, I don't do what you do. And I couldn't do what you do for more than like 5 minutes, and then I'd be burnt out. But in those sessions, we ask people to talk to colleagues. What do you do right now? Before I started doing that, I had one person say, hey, I get up at 4 a.m. to get to the hospital to do rounds. You want me to get up at 3 in the morning so I could get on my treadmill? So that's a pretty humbling experience. And so I do understand that we all have boundaries and limitations. But if you can do some of this, little bits, and just start, it's really helpful. The last point is so important, that relationships are probably the single best, social relationships are the single best stress reducer. They make us strong. And so I've always suggested, when we hear the phrase, be socially distant, that's a really bad idea. To be physically distant, different story, but don't be socially distant. How do you maintain the connections you have? How do you maintain your relationships? How do you develop new ones? How do you nurture those relationships? If you have a friend you haven't talked to in a while, contact that individual. The friends they're priceless. And that friend probably needs you as well. You're not imposing. Having said all this, time is a limited commodity. It's probably better to get that extra hour of sleep than doing other things. But, do not fear, right? There's other things that we can do. The next few pages are about things that you can do that don't take a ton of time. And here are a few. Prepare. What could happen? Again, this is the employee feedback. It's like, oh, he shouldn't be surprised. Oh, gosh, what if he is? Let me take 10 seconds and just, okay, if he really just pushes back, what am I going to do? So let me not be surprised. Self-talk. Okay, everything's gonna be fine. Everything's good. I know what I'm doing. That reassuring inner voice of yours. The key is to do it to yourself. Don't talk out loud as you're walking down the street. Modify the situation. I have a client. We would meet. The only time that we could meet was 4 p.m. on a Friday. And I had the first meeting. It was okay, but we're kind of mailing it in. Toward the end of the second one, I just said, should we continue meeting at this time? And people just stopped and said, oh no, it's really terrible. So it was like, I think we meet at Fridays at noon or something. It's like any other time and any other day than last meeting on a Friday. Modify your mood is a lot. This is a really critical one because, we're in front of groups and people all the time. And I remind myself of this a lot, which is I may not be quote unquote in the mood for something, but I have to be on stage sometimes literally and things like that. I'm not going to suppress how I feel, but I can modify my mood. I can psych myself up. even, sitting up straight, how I put my lights on, that just psych yourself up, express a different mood. Reappraisal is key. I think that most of us act like jerks at times, but very few of us are jerks. And I always think about this. If someone says something to me or does something that I just like, that wasn't kind. And anytime, I don't actually say this even in my head anymore. I used to say, what a jerk. I don't do that anymore. I always just think, I wonder what's going on in his life. I know my life is complicated. Bet to that person, I have no idea what's going on. I barely know what's going on with me. Cut them a break. Intervening moment, take a pause. I take my glasses off. Interesting. Take a breath. It just gives me like 2 seconds. If you've gotten an email that you responded to and realize, oh, shouldn't have hit send, hit reply, delete the name, type it in response, go back a minute later or the end of the day. I guarantee 100% of the time you'll change it and you'll feel so much more emotionally intelligent. And then all the physiological techniques of a deep breath, of inhaling, standing. At one point I had a headset and I'd walk around. I don't do that anymore. These things don't take time. They're in the moment. Now, that's you. That's internal to you. We talked about validation, but now you have this opportunity to do really cool things with others. And this happens on multiple levels. You're working with someone, you're talking to someone. Again, a teenagers come to mind now. Nodding your head, eye contact, putting your phone away. That's a tough one. Showing interest, paraphrase. So you're saying, even though you signed up for that class, you're really not enjoying it? Is that what you're? Yeah, you don't have to agree. It's not just, you're not agreeing. Paraphrase, like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hypothesize, instead of saying, you're so angry, it sounds like you're really frustrated because of, is that right? Because sometimes we're going to get it wrong. And the person might say, oh, is that what I sounded like? No, I was just so distracted. I got this email before, this text from my friend, and no, mom or dad, or I'm not. Or sometimes, yeah, I am kind of frustrated. But don't you find it annoying when someone tells you how you're feeling? So don't do it. Don't do it. That's the validation. That's the validate their perspective because they feel that way. The worry is you're validating like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? I'm here to help. Okay. Is there something I can do to support you? What are you trying to do? Is there something that I can help with? Look, sometimes people do want problem solving, but as you know, sometimes they just, am I there for you? Can I trust you? Are you the parent that I can go to when I have an issue? Are you the boss that I can actually feel comfortable talking to? Apologizing is we could do an entire course of how to apologize. I do it a lot when I mess up, but it has to be meaningful. It has to be real. Just don't do it. You'll make it worse. And the last idea is shared experience. As a parent, as long as it's developmentally appropriate, yeah, high school was tough for me. I'm not going to tell you exactly what went on, but no, it was hard. So I think I understand if you're struggling. As an employer, it's guys, I'm, if I haven't been emotionally present for you, it's not because of work. I have some other things going on. Be careful with that. There are boundaries, but disclosure is really, really helpful. And then, so with that, I've mentioned before, and it's so worth repeating. These 4 hard skills of emotional intelligence, they're pretty simplistic. But the challenge for all of us, and this is certainly true for me, is to show these skills in real time, not in a presentation on Zoom, in your life at a really high level of expertise where it's a stressful situation. And to do that consistently, I like that. I set that challenge out for myself. I know I'll never do it, but it's always worth trying. Because, once you say something or do something, it's so hard to unravel that. And and take it back. And when I fail, which I fail like multiple times a day, that's when an apology comes in. And I'll just say, I'm really sorry. I'm tired today, or just, I have no excuse. I have no excuse. I just couldn't do it today. And I apologize. If I really messed up. I used to look at this and also it just make me feel even more anxious or frustrated with myself, because I think for me, this may help you as well, that I see this as, here's the ideal, right? Here's perfection. And I'm never going to hit that. So what a bummer that is, right? But for me, I like to think about, well, wait a minute, given my background and who I am and how my own temperament, I should be here. And every day that I could do a little better, I should be proud of that. So I remind myself of that. It's a really good motivator. So don't hold yourself up to the ideal or the perfect, because we're not going to get there. It's worth trying, but we're going to fail. And when you do, you just, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just say, I'm glad I tried at least. I'm glad I tried. So with that, I hope that you can leverage some of these things, whether it's the real how are you conversation, when you get that answer, to just try to feel what that person feels, make the connection, ask them what's going on, engage in one or more of those emotion management strategies. Try it. It won't be perfect, but I think it'll be enormously helpful to apply these skills. And we call it our emotional intelligence blueprint. Simple and simplistic, but try it. How do you feel? How do you feel? And others. And ask them, because don't assume you know. Match those feelings to connect and match the emotions to get the work done. Okay, what words exactly describe these things and what caused them? How might they change? And then constantly you're moving emotions, because emotions are movement. How do you stay open to these things instead of squashing them and controlling them and tightly regulating them? Because emotions give meaning to us. Emotions can help us think. Emotions define the essence of our humanity. So try it and let us know how it goes. Successes, we're going to mess it up, but that's how we learn. There's additional information here. As I mentioned, an email address is here. If you disagree with something I said, to be real blunt, I don't like hearing it, but I need to, right? I know it, and that's how I learn. It's like, oh gosh, I can't believe I said that. Did I really say that? Yes, you did. I need to know that. I need to know when something wasn't clear. I need to know when you disagree with it. That's how I learn. And with that, how do we want to wrap up? Emotions are data. We feel how we feel. But as I said before, I would like you to leave feeling pleasant, because you'll be reflective. You'll think about these things. And if you leave being a little jazzed or energized, it's like, oh, all right, here's what I'm going to do. That's even better. So, I'm going to sit up straight and thank you for being here. I really think these skills are enormously important. And I think we can all be a little better at it. And I think we can all make the world a slightly better place locally. And that has a huge impact on everything that we do. So give it a whirl, give it a try, and let us know how it goes. So thank you for your time and your attention today. I really deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all these knowledge, David, from many decades of research and practical applications with the teams that you have trained and worked with. There's a question from Mark. Mark wonder, is emotional intelligence with an ability-based model different from, I guess he was asking about a general understanding of emotional intelligence. Do you have a thought on this?
You hear terms like EQ, which means sort of like a whole bunch of stuff. It's a bit of a Rorschach. Yeah, and in our work, emotional intelligence is a skill. It's a hard skill, and we call it the ability model. So it's definitely, as I hope that people saw, a set of hard skills. The cool thing about that is that we can learn hard skills. Like I didn't know Excel many years ago, and now I use Excel. I didn't know how to drive many years ago, and now I know how to drive. It's like any other skill. You can learn it, you can develop it, you get better at it with feedback and experience.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. If the audience has any further questions, please feel free to share. And thank you so much for joining. I think it's a really good point, and actually good news to hear that emotional intelligence is something that we can improve. And David has the emotional intelligence test that he co-authored with two other psychologists that you can sign up on Emotions. I think that's a good starting point of knowing where we are. I took it myself. It's very informative. Where we are in terms of what to focus on in terms of developing, and also you can sign up for personalized feedback session, coaching session, and future workshops that we have as a series to further develop these emotional intelligence skills. David, any other thoughts you have to kind of include what other ways can people use to develop their emotional intelligence?
Because it's a skill, it's one of those things where reading can help. It really can. Look, we spent an hour doing this, and I think if you try some of these things, knowing is great, doing is a little better.
Yeah.
So I would try, just even today, just ask someone, just engage in that how are you thing, try it. And I'd love to hear what happens. So leverage the skills, get a little feedback, and try it again.
Doing and practicing. Yeah. And we're going to
practicing and feedback. Yeah, absolutely key.
And feedback.
Yeah, feedback is really key.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how does emotional intelligence work in a team setting? And so I can see how it works in one-on-one interactions, but in team setting, how does it work without you losing yourself?
Yeah. So, the more people, the more emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just a lot more complicated. It's like solving a mathematical simultaneous equation with a lot of unknowns. The challenge there, so when we do some of our training, I actually don't go through the skills in that order because of what you said, right? So if I'm picking up on this team's emotions and I'm feeling all those emotions, I'm going to burn out like really quickly, right? So it happens a lot. So we actually flip the model around, and we start by building those emotion management strategies. So, because it's almost, I use this phrase, and that it's almost unethical to ask people to be more open to emotions if they don't have the skill to manage and integrate and handle those. It's not fair. And so we start with those, which is, how can you build your own inner strength and resilience? Do it first. And that actually gives you the strength, the emotional strength, to engage in these conversations, because you know what to do with those things. Because otherwise, I think you're absolutely right. It's just like, it's overwhelming, which is why I think a lot of us don't ask. So teams are complicated. And then you have to validate everybody. But I always will say that, look, this happened. I asked that. I've asked for the last couple of years now with clients. I've put up that mood map with those feeling words and said, not how you're feeling in general, but how are you feeling about this project or this meeting? And if it's a big group, it's in chat or polls or whatever. And I will tell you, people are really blunt about it, and very honest. Initially I was taken aback. Now I expect it. But people are all over the map. They're all over the mood map. But now the meeting has to go on. So we validate that and say, look, Some of you are ready for this. Some of you aren't. But it's, but scheduling is really tough. And I know some of you are not in the mood to go on with this, but we need, the show has to go on. We have to do it. These are professionals. And so I need your best attention. Give me your best effort, whatever that is and whatever that looks like. And you have to be sincere. You have to also say, look, there are times when I don't want to go on and do this, but we have this obligation. We have to do it. I have an obligation to you, as I mentioned earlier. So I think a little bit of honesty with people helps, and acknowledge and validate you're not all there, but this is where you are schedule wise. I have to go on and do this. Can you please work with me as best you can? So I think that acknowledgement, that validation is enormously helpful. But
Great.
it's
Thank
really
you.
complicated. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, thank you for that great question.
Yeah.
I think we will probably explore ways to, for example, like if a team wants to join this kind of workshops and develop the skills together, we'll probably explore some ways to host a team as well. So that's an option. And we'll probably also host some other practice sessions for people to practice together in a group setting to work on some of these skills, maybe in a little bit lower risk way. So that's other things that we're exploring as well. Thank you so much, Atienne, for joining. I would love to follow up and hear your feedback on this, and welcome any feedback and ideas at any time as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
great seeing you, Pian Pian. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Joining. Bye-bye.